In section 2, problem 2, part of the thing that makes this difficult is, once again, you are not allowed to use a calculator on this. So there's definitely some multiplying that you have to be able to do without a calculator, and some long division as well. First off, you need to remember the order of operations. So remember, we're talking about PEMDAS. When you're doing problems, you always need to do any parentheses first, then any exponents, then multiplication and division would come next, but you would just have to go left to right. So if there's division that happens before multiplication, that's fine. You should do the division first. You just go left to right, and then same thing with the addition and subtraction. One of those doesn't come before the other one. If all you see is addition and subtraction, you should just do it in order from left to right as well. So looking at this problem, we're starting off with any parentheses. Noticing here, there's really there are parentheses, but there's nothing to do inside of the parentheses, so I really don't have to worry about that first. But next off, I notice that I should deal with any exponents. Well, there is an exponent, so I know that really I'm just going to start off by worrying about what 2.25 squared turns out to be, and then after I figure that out is when I multiply by 3. So what is 2.25 squared? The easiest way that I know how to do this is to actually convert it to fractions. And I know that a lot of kids don't like dealing with fractions, but it just makes this problem easier to work with. So I know 2.25 is the same as 2 and 1/4. So 2 and 1/4. And of course I need to square 2 and 1/4, which that's not easy to do in itself right now either. So what I would do is I would multiply, like we've talked about, the 2 times the 4, which is 8, and then add the 1 in the numerator. So 9 over, and then we have the denominator of 4. So 9 over 4, and now our goal is to square 9 over 4. When we do that, you may or may not have practiced this, but 9 squared, you can do the top number squared, so 9 squared over, and then we can do the bottom number squared as well. So you do both parts and square them. So you get 9 squared over 4 squared. Well, 9 squared is the same thing as 9 times 9, which is 81, over 4 squared, which is the same thing as 16. 4 times 4 is 16. So what I have now is I know that this 2.25 squared equaled 81/16. So the last thing I need to do now is multiply by 3. So 3 times 81/16. Well, if we're remembering what 3 is, it is a fraction with a 1 on the bottom. So now all I need to do is make sure that I'm multiplying the 3 times the 81. So you do the top times top, 3 times 81, and then you'll do bottom times bottom. Well, in this case, the bottom is a lot easier to do than the top. So let's multiply 1 times 16, which is equal to 16. 3 times 81, if you don't know it off the top of your head, that's fine. You'll just have to do some multiplying here. So 81 times 3, we're going to do 3 times 1 first, which is 3. And then we're going to do 3 times 8, 8, 16, 24. So 8 times 3 is 24. So we know that 81 times 3 is 243. The last thing we need to do is convert this to a decimal so we can type our answer in the box. And to do that, we need to figure out what 243 over 16 is. Well, that's another way, and fractions are the same thing as division, so we really need to figure out what is 243 divided by 16. So using long division is going to help us in this problem. First off, when you have long division, you need to say, does 16 go into 2? Well, no, because 16 is bigger than 2. Does 16 go into 24? The answer is yes. Well, how many times does 16 go into 24? Well, it only goes in one time completely. So we know that we have a 1 on top. Then after that point, what you do is you take the 1 that you wrote and multiply by 16. So 1 times 16 gives me 16, and you write the answer there. After you do that, you'll do a subtraction problem where you will do 24 minus 16. So 24 minus 16 is equal to 8. And if you didn't know that, remember, you can't do 4 minus 6, so you need to actually borrow from the one next to it. So you'll cross that off and put a 1, and then you'll put a 1 here. So 14 minus 6 is 8, and then we have 1 minus 1 would be 0. So we're left with just an 8. You bring down your next number, which is a 3, and then ask yourself, how many times does 16 go into 83? Well, I don't know that off the top of my head, so I'll just have to kind of guess and check. Well, does it go in 4 times? Well, 6 times 4 is 6, 12, 18, 24. So 24. 4 times 1. 4 times 1 is 4. Plus 2 gives me 6. So 16 times 4 is 64. What's 16 times 5? Well, 6 times 5 is 30, so I'll put the 0 here and the 3 here. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So it looks like 16 times 5 is 80. So therefore, I know that 16 goes into 83 5 times. 16 goes into 83 5 times. I can't do any more than that because then I'd be going over 83. Now what I do is the same thing I did before. It's 5 times 16, that number goes here. Well, we already did that on this side. 5 times 16 is 80. And then I do my subtraction problem. So 83 minus 80 is 3. Well, the problem is now I still have a remainder, but I don't have any more numbers to bring down. So remember, that's when you put a decimal, and then you just bring down a 0. How many times does 16 go into 30? Well, 16 goes into 30. Well, 16 times 2 is 32, which is more than 30, so it only goes in 1 time. Now I take, just like I've been doing, the 1 times the 16, which gives me 16, and I write that number down here. I do a subtraction problem. What's 30 minus 16? Well, 0 minus 6, I can't do that, so I need to borrow from here, so a 2 now, and I put a 1 here. 10 minus 6 is 4, 2 minus 1 is 1, so I'm left with 14. Same thing as before, I don't have any more numbers to bring down, so I'll just bring down another 0. So now I have 140. How many times does 16 go into 140? Well, if you don't know, let's just try something. It's got to be bigger than 5, because when I multiply by 5, it only gave me 80. So let's try multiplying by 7. 6 times 7 is 42. 7 times 1 is 7, plus 4 is 11. So we're up to 112. So we'll need something just a little bit bigger than that. How about 8? 6 times 8 is 48. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 4 is 12. So we have 128. 128 looks to be like the biggest number because if we had 16, we're going to be higher than 140. So I know that 16 goes into 140 8 times. Now when I take the 8 multiplied by 16, I get 128. We just got done doing that. And then I'll subtract the problem here. So I'm left with 140 minus 128 gives me 12. I still have a remainder, which I don't want, so I'll bring down another 0. So I'll bring down another 0. And then we'll do it couple more times. Hopefully we're getting close to the end here. How many times does 16 go into 120? Well, looking back at my work, this is why it's good to keep your work here. I see that 16 times 7 is 112, so that must be, that's the biggest number there, so it looks like I'm going to write a 7 on top. So let's do that. So a 7. What's 7 times 16? Well, 7 times 16 is 112, which we did. 112 minus, or 120 minus 112 is 8. Once again, we still have a remainder, so we'll bring down another 0. So now we're left with 80. How many times does 16 go into 80? Well, like I said, that's good we're showing our work because we have an answer here that multiplies to 80. 16 times 5 is equal to 80. So I know when I'm figuring out 16 times what gives me 80, well, that number that I write on top has to be a 5. 5 times 16 gave me 80. So the remainder is 0. So we finally have the remainder of 0. It took a long time, but we got there. And now since the remainder is 0, we have an answer. We can write down inside the box. So this is our answer, 15.1875. So it does take a lot of patience on these. Make sure you're using scratch paper so you're keeping your work straight and organized. And you will have to practice multiplying skills, and you really have to remember how to do long division as well. So take some time to practice those so that when you get to them on the test and you can't use the calculator, you're able to work through it using strategies that you've learned.